Hello, and this is Friday at 11 Hangout Show with myself. I'm Aly Hodge from Bug, Bird and Bee. My lower third isn't working. We talk every week about subjects that come to mind about parenting. Sometimes we have a pre-described list of subjects. And this week we're going to be talking about how we go about talking about things that happen in the news. This week, sadly, there was a plane crash over the French Alps, and we're going to discuss how we approach that with our children. We have Joanne Brady from Kids Days Out for Reviews.
Hello.
Troy Jackson from Pink Oddy.
Hello.
And Penny Carr from Being Mrs. C.
Hi there.
So let's start with Joanne. How many children do you have, and what ages they are, and how do you go about approaching things in the news?
Well, basically, I've got 4 children, all girls, and the youngest 2 are 4, and then they go up 7 and 10. Can you hear me, by the way? Mine doesn't seem to be. Okay. How do I approach the news? I, first of all, try not to let them watch the news, if I'm honest. I used to watch Sky News a lot, BBC News a lot, on the red button, things like that. I have stopped doing that, mainly because I'm watching something, and then I hear a little voice on my shoulder going, "Oh, mummy, what's a plane crash?" And you think, oh, do you know, there are some subjects that you can talk about with your children, such as plane crashes, but there's other subjects that come up on the news a lot recently that you don't really want to approach, even at 10 years old. And I just have not a ban on the news on the telly, but I really try hard not to leave the news on. For example, if I go out the room and come back in, I always try and put it on CBeebies or something a little bit less controversial, really. How do I approach the news? If it's something that you can discuss and you can explain it to them, then I think you should. If it's something you can't, probably just run for the hills and just hope they don't ask it again. Preferably not round the dinner table on a Sunday dinner with the grandparents. Yeah, there are things that I really don't want them to see, and I just try really hard to shelter them from it, really. I mean, my most news viewing now goes on social media. A lot of news that I personally receive is basically either on Facebook or Twitter or Google+. And I've sort of made a big shift, really, as a parent, from watching the news live on telly, in a living room where everybody can see it, to, you know, on my phone where they can't.
What about you, Joy? How many children do you have, and what ages are they?
I also have 4 children, but mine are all boys. They are 5, nearly 6, 7, 11 and 18. And pretty much like Joanne, I tend to avoid the news. We don't watch it on the telly. I've thought the opposite. I've thought maybe I should be watching it and discussing it with them, because other children might, or they might hear it. But my biggest gripe is on the radio, because I'll be driving along and they'll be talking about, the biggest thing for me, it's not particularly news, but in their news section it'd be about 50 Shades of Grey, and it was all about the book and the film, and I don't really think that's appropriate for my 5, 7 and 11-year-old to be hearing, you know, especially the content of what it is, and they're little jokes that maybe the kids don't understand, but then they might want it discussing. And then of course there's all the sexual abuse stuff with Rolf Harris and all that sort of stuff that really I don't want my children going, well, what's that about? So yeah, and then, but on the other hand, my 18-year-old, there's stuff about the elections, so I have been trying to involve him in that, because I think that's important and that is appropriate for them to listen to.
And you, Penny, how many children do you have, and what ages are they?
I feel like I've not put the effort in here. I've only got 2 children, but actually that's enough for the time being. Thank you very much. So my children, my daughter is 4.5 and is actually just sat over the other side of the room as well, so I'll be careful what I say here because she's off school ill today. And I've got a son who is 2.5 as well, so somewhat younger. And I think it's actually quite interesting. I think what the other 2 have said is quite fascinating as well. I mean, I was a complete news junkie. I was someone who, as a student, would put on BBC News 24 in the background, and I'd have that on all day. I knew everything that was going on with every top news story. I knew the in-out detail. I knew all the politics, the whole lot. Now I don't, mainly because the TV's nearly always tuned to CBeebies, or I think we've got Tiny Pop on today, which is some new discovery that my daughter's made while off school. But as Joy said, there's the issue of the radio as well. I often put the radio on, and in the car we've always got the radio on the hour or on the half hour, depending on what station you listen to, you've always got a news bulletin. And kids listen and they repeat things and they ask questions, and that's quite tricky actually, because do you censor the radio as well? Because I think it's important that kids do know what's going on in the world, and I know even at school as part of the curriculum they try and talk about some world events. I mean, my daughter's just at an infant school, so obviously, you know, they do tailor it to be age appropriate, but they do talk about world events, and I think it's important to talk about world events. You know, I mean, I took my daughter to the Tower of London to see the poppies, for instance, and I talked to her about what they were and what they symbolised, and that's quite a big subject for a 4-year-old to get to grips with. But I thought it important for her to do so, and like one of you mentioned, the election as well. I think it is important, even at that young age, to talk about the election. Her school's going to be used as a polling station, so it's going to be right there in front of her, and again, it's a good opportunity. But when it's news stories like over the last week, it's tough, isn't it? You know, it's in this particular story, it's something that us as adults are all kind of in shock at, and we're trying to understand it, and we're struggling to understand it. And I think you can't really share something that you're struggling to understand with a child if you can't answer their questions, because at the moment I think we've not got the answers, have we?
No, that's true. I've got 3 children. My oldest is 12, he's a boy, and then I've got 2 daughters, 9, and my youngest just turned 7 this week. And I always have my half an hour in the morning before they're allowed to watch their programmes of watching the news, because it tends to repeat itself. And I find when something like this, like with the plane crash, it gets very technical, and they take away the emotion of the event. So they talk about the black box and where it was situated, and I think it can become quite a numbing event, if that makes sense. You know, you're not discussing people's lives and things. And I haven't watched the news the last couple of days. Again, watching via Twitter and Facebook and keeping up like that, because I didn't know about the latest development about the pilot actually did it on purpose, because I chosen not to watch the news with my children. And I do that quite a lot with things that are quite emotionally taxing, again, because I don't know how to process that as an adult. And talking with my children, I need to understand it myself before I talk it with them. But again, yeah, things like the election, important things that remind us of what things have happened in the past, like the war, and when there's been natural disasters. I like for the children to be sat there and watching it.
Well, I think that's where Newsround, the BBC's Newsround, has got a really important part to play, actually, because of the way that they look at which news stories they cover and how they cover them.
Yes.
And I think, I mean, my kids aren't old enough really to be, watching that on themselves, but I know for me as a child, it helped put a perspective on a lot of news stories and helped me understand where they were coming from, and it would address the issues which might concern me as a child at the time, if you see what I mean. So, and I know now they've got quite a big web presence, Newsround do, and I think again it's a really useful resource for children.
But because the way that channels have grown, you don't have that integration with children's programs and adults programs. When I was younger, you'd have from like
3:30, wasn't it?
3 to 6 would be child programs, but now they have a separate channel. So Newsround doesn't get watched now, and I used to like watching John Craven. It used to be
and his jumpers.
Process it in a childlike way, and you could go on and be a Newsround reporter yourself. But that's been taken away from them because BBC, when you now have the game shows and everything like that, there's no child element to it because they have their own channel, and you sort of like, well, they had to watch their channel, well, I watch mine later on, kind of thing. And so you're arguing about what to watch. So yeah, that's true, that sort of element's been taken away.
But I mean, Newsround does still exist. I'm just looking now, and the Newsround website is still there. You can watch, they have like Friday mornings top stories and stuff. But I have to admit, in the terms of the printed news or the news that's written on their front page right now, There's no mention of the events in France. I'm not seeing at all. Whether or not they're hidden somewhere else, I don't know, but I just find that quite interesting that it's just not on there. Some editorial decision has obviously been taken.
So do any of you buy newspapers, and do your children have access to newspapers so they can read it in print?
We haven't bought any newspapers, I don't really think, for quite a long time, unless I'm in it. We go and buy a copy. But my mum and dad are massive big newspaper readers, and we always go to their house. They still occasionally buy the Sun, but that's raised a few questions from having daughters as to why women feel it necessary to get the boobs out for a newspaper. And I'm like, well, you know, you kind of got to explain it the best you can, really, which, like I say, there's too many issues involved in that for me to even get started, really. But yeah, they do leave a lot of newspapers lying around. We have a news agent on the way home from school, and they have the airboard outside with the headline in. I have been asked on a couple of occasions, because my children are very, very fast readers. Mummy, what's a rapist? Brilliant, you know, just what I need at sort of 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So you kind of, the print media as well, once to start reading, you've got no chance, really. But we haven't bought a newspaper for probably a year, I reckon, just because we just can't, you can never guarantee what's in it. And they just read, the big readers, and they want to know, you know?
Yeah. I think what you said earlier there, Jo, is also right, in that the way we consume the news now. I mean, I get most breaking news stories on my phone just because I'll be there looking at Twitter or Facebook and they'll pop up in my timeline, you know, and that's where I hear stories from first, not from the radio, not from the television.
I think that we're missing stuff now, though, because I've actually thought maybe I should buy newspapers because I only buy it when I want the Lego. And there is the fact that newspapers have got bias, and you know, you've got some to the left, some to the right, and I need to buy these papers and show my children. I mean, especially with advertising, they're especially vulnerable to advertising. They're targeting it now. You know, they've got these children's channels, so it is targeted specifically at them. And so I think newspapers are a good way of demonstrating to the children, look, this has got a purpose. You can see the same story from a completely different angle.
You see, you're so spot on there, Joy, because I remember when I did A-level general studies, and I remember this lesson, clear as crystal. Our deputy headmaster came into the classroom, and in his arm he'd been to the local newsagent, and he had bought every single newspaper in the local newsagent. So, you know, you've got Times, Telegraph, Guardian, Sun, Mirror, Today, as it was back then, all the rest of it. And he plonked them down on the front table, told everyone to take a paper. He spent 5 minutes reading the paper, and then we had to say what we thought that paper, what their viewpoint was and everything. And then he told us, you know, and he said, well, this is a left paper, this is a right one, this kind of thing. And that lesson has stayed with me forever. And it was such a valuable, valuable lesson. And I don't really buy a paper much these days, but I picked one up on Saturday. And part of the reason was that recently I have felt out of touch with world events. I remember sitting in the pub with my husband one night, very rare event, and he went to the loo and I went on my phone, and suddenly there's all this stuff about Putin, and that was when Putin had gone missing for a week or whatever, and I'd somehow completely missed this news story for some reason, not sure why, and it made me think, hang on, there's some big world events that I know nothing about. But the other thing that drove me to buy a newspaper last week excuse me, was actually the appointment of the new editor of the Guardian, which is Kath Viner, which brilliant to see a woman going into a top role like that. But also her mum taught me GCSE history, and her mum taught me all the things about looking at historical sources, looking at old newspapers, understanding what was propaganda, what wasn't, because we studied the First and Second World War, you see, in GCSE history with her mum. So it's kind of interesting that I now look at her and her style of writing and everything, and look at her paper, it will be her paper very soon, and the angle they take, and think back to her mum's history lessons, you know, in a slightly bizarre way. But it made me realise I miss reading a paper. I actually miss reading the in-depth articles. But I think that's when you've got young kids, you just don't have time, do you?
No, I mean, we stopped getting a Sunday paper. We used to get one delivered. We used to get, what did we used to get? I think we used to get the Express just once a week on a Sunday. And some days it was Wednesday or Thursday before I'd even have time to even just pick it up and look and see what was in it. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. You know, we don't have the time. Yes, you know, things like Twitter when you're a parent are brilliant because you can just spend 5 minutes flicking through while you're making tea and you're done. But the problem with Twitter is that you can shape it into your own little world. What you want to hear, the people you want to hear from, and the topics you want to hear about. So like you say, when Vladimir Putin goes missing, I miss that one as well, because probably people that I follow were not interested in events in Russia.
You see, I missed it, and yet I follow all the major newspapers and news organisations, and I still missed it, you know. But that's just the way it can be with social media. You know, if something else is happening that's bigger, according to Facebook or something, you miss it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the third thing about Twitter is, like you say, you can tailor it exactly to what you want. So you tend to only get news that you're interested in, and then you miss things. At least with a paper, you open it and you see what other people are talking about as well, you know, which is good. I mean, occasionally I do a little, you know, trend search on Twitter to see if there's anything sort of outside my bubbles, so to speak. But yeah, that's about as good as it gets these days, I think, the trending topics on Twitter. And some of them make me sad anyway, so...
Yeah, I find with social media it's very blinkered, you know, as opposed to what reading something or watching something on the news. You don't have much of a variant on the topic, so you can sort of like, oh, right, you choose not to look into any further. Okay, so my next question is how do you approach children when they get onto social media? What if they, you know, they decide to make their own news? How do you go about approaching that?
Again, I just talk really importantly about how, you know, where the news is coming from, what's the purpose. You know, if there was a study on, you know, breastfeeding being more intelligent and something, and there was a lot of controversy of people who didn't breastfeed and stuff like that, and I talk about, you know, why is this study running, what is the purpose. So I just make sure my children are aware of that sort of thing all the time.
Yeah, and also something that I find quite interesting is, especially on Facebook, there's a news item, and instead of people checking the source, they quite happily reshare stuff.
Oh.
It happened quite recently, and Tony Hart died again. I remember when Tony Hart died because I was a big fan, and I also remember blogging about it. And ironically, I found the news out from another friend on Facebook who blogged about it. And when she was the first person to share it on Facebook, and I said, Zoe, hang on, he died in 2009, and you're the person who shared the news with me. Don't you remember blogging about it? And she went, oh, yeah, of course I remember that. But the events of that, people resharing old news and not checking, and the same when somebody is supposedly have died, and people quite happily share without checking the source.
But it's not just news, though. It's you see all the warnings about things. You see people saying, "Oh, this scam happened," and you just do a very quick Google, and most of them are just
because I in the beginning, before I sort of like got into social media, I was quite happily resharing stuff about checking the sources, like when John Jovi died, and everybody was saying, oh, he hasn't died, and of course it escalated onto Twitter as well, and he posted a picture of himself on some bridge somewhere, no, I'm alive, kind of thing. But when you see a name trending, do you automatically assume they've died? And you have to check, oh, no, I hope they haven't died. Or the other thing is that, oh no, perhaps it's part of, you know, the child sex abuse scandal. So do you have a sort of like pre-thought on what's happened to that person before you click on them, if they're trending?
Yeah. I'm afraid I do.
Yeah, I do. But I've got a friend who works at a press association, and if he's on Facebook saying somebody's died, they've died, and until he has been on Facebook and said they've died, they're still alive and kicking on a bridge, posting photos of themselves on Twitter, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, but I think so. My approach to children and social media really is the same as any media, and I'll be very proud to breed cynics, basically, because I tell them that people put adverts on because they have to tell you about how good their product is, because nobody's buying it because it's rubbish. And I tell them, you know, people tell you stuff in the newspaper because they want you to believe that. and people, put television programs on because they want you to watch them. They're not doing it out of the goodness of the heart. They're doing it because they know they can sell advertising slots to sell you rubbish that you don't want. And I'm just kind of sort of putting that mentality into them a little bit to make them not cynical, I suppose, but I don't want them to take everything in unquestionably.
But it's
I want them to challenge what's put in front of them and look at it from a few different angles before they accept their own truth.
But Jo, it's like what I was talking about, my GCSE history, going back to that almost, isn't it? It's like if you look at a range of historical sources, you're taught at school how to assess those sources, to look at who wrote an article, can you trust a photograph, all that kind of thing. And it's applying those same techniques to modern day life, actually, because back then everything came through the media organisations, whereas now with social media it comes from individuals, and it's just going through that same process again. So I think what you're teaching them is exactly spot on, and hopefully when they come to do their GCSE history, they'll be right in there.
See, and everybody said A-level communication studies would be a waste of time, right? Well, 20 years ago maybe. Now it is like paramount everywhere. It's just, learning communication studies were just unbelievable.
I take the same approach, and my oldest rips apart a lot of stuff that's on television because he's followed my thingy of saying, I know, they're only trying to sell you stuff and everything. Because we're quite a non-commercial family. There's very little that we buy or in the way of brands, and if there is a brand we do like, it's because we like the product, not the brand. If that makes sense. So yeah, my kids aren't as sort of like hyped about things, and they don't have to have, if they like something, they don't have to have all the merchandise. And so yeah, my eldest has been able to be very, very cynical about things, but sort of like, yeah, but you are still 12, you can still like something because you like it. You don't have to that you don't have to fall into the trap of buying everything. You can still like that, but you don't have to have everything to do with that. Whatever it is that you like, be it a cartoon or a film.
So do we think that social media should be on the national curriculum then? There should be some, guidance and help and questions for them.
I know that it was talked about at my son's school because there was an incident with a young girl who was trolling a number of her friends, and she got found out. The police was called. Called into the school. And they are very social media savvy.
I think now it is, though, isn't it? I mean, I know my daughter's only reception at the moment, but I know year 2 at her school, so infant school, so top year at the infant school, they've been doing stuff already about social media in terms of what it's safe to say online, what it's not safe to say online, and also how to get help or who to talk to if you don't like something that's being said to you or about you online. And they're doing that in year 2. And I've seen that because they've designed big posters which were put up on their classroom windows so that parents could see what they were doing as well.
I don't think, children don't have to be on social media to be affected by social media. There's quite often when I'm sat on watching, reading stuff on Facebook, and one of my kids come along and say, oh, what's that and what's that? And I have to be careful, and I quite more likely have to click off. I won't watching silly videos and stuff. My youngest will quite happily sit there, but I have to sort of like quickly go through because a lot of my friends post things that are not appropriate for a 7-year-old to look. So it's you have to be aware of what they have access to. My kids aren't allowed on my phone anymore because they can inadvertently click on something or take my phone. Actually, it's locked now. I have to have a password to get in. So they can't have access to it as much as they used to a couple of years ago. But yeah, it's being wary about what they can see without actually being on social media. So for those who've got older children, how do you approach it from the fact that they have access to computers or tablets, whatever, with their friends? And how do you deal with things that their friends see or have access to, but you don't let them have access to?
Mine just know the rules and they just do it. And not particularly social media, but there was a Grand Theft Auto. We don't like it. We don't let them play it. We're not even keen that our 18-year-old plays it or watches it or whatever. Obviously, that's then up to his choice. And my son went to his friend's house, and his friend and his brothers said, "Play it. We won't tell your mum." And he was like, "No, I'm not allowed." And so he just didn't play it. I mean, we don't just say, "No, you can't do this." We usually explain in some sort of form of why, we don't think it's suitable, blah blah blah, and he listens. So I think we've been quite lucky in that respect, though. And hopefully that'll continue with all of them.
Well, my oldest one is 10. She's got a Kindle Fire something or other, I don't know. Rubbish. We should have bought her an iPad. Anyway, she's allowed on Pinterest. I let her on Pinterest mainly because you don't have to have friends to make it happen. You can go on Pinterest and you can browse your interests and you can make boards. You don't have to talk to anybody else on there. You can just do it. She wants Instagram. I'm like, no, not really, because I've seen what goes on with teenage girls on Instagram and it is not healthy. And then she's coming up to the age where she's going to want Facebook, and I'm going to let her on because obviously I can't sit here all day selling my Facebook services to other people and then telling her she can't do it. But it will be monitored. It will be very closely monitored, and she does get tablet bans. If she's misappropriate behaviour, we do take it off her. But it's quite good at that age to have something like that. I mean, she's got her own email address. She can email, grandma and her cousins, and she does little competition entries using her email address and things like that. So it's not a bad thing to have. And it's just, like I say, policing it and making sure that they know what you're happy for them to do and not happy for them to do, and why you're not happy for them to do that. 7-year-old's got a tablet. She mainly uses it to beat me at Words with Friends and to send the odd email to her grandma, and that's it really. So yeah, we haven't had to broach it yet with her.
Right, I think we're going to start winding up now. Thank you very much for coming along, and if you are watching this, please just subscribe. So yeah, Easter holidays coming up. Any plans for anybody?
No, I think I'm still in denial that it's happening, to be honest with you. We don't finish until next Thursday, though, so not until Maundy Thursday itself. And because my daughter's been off for most of the last week, actually, it all feels so disjointed to me that, yeah, I'm just in complete denial.
We break up today with all my three. We've got a few things planned, but I tend to have, we're going to have this done, but I haven't actually planned when this is going to happen. We're going to do a garden. That's the main thing that we're going to do. But yeah, it's 2 weeks. It's sort of like, if I plan too much, then the kids go, "Oh, I'm tired." So yeah, take it as we go along, really. But the garden is the main thing.
Yeah, we were going to have a press trip next week, but that's been cancelled. But I have got a few little days out planned around things. But I'm kind of glad it's cancelled, really, because I've got a lot of work on, and I have done absolutely no prep for next week anyway. So I would have had to work maybe 3 days next week. So I've got 3 days work next week, and then a couple of days out, and then I have no idea what I'm going to do the week after. 2 weeks. 2 weeks. But luckily the weather's looking nice up here at the minute, so we can get in the garden a bit more or go to the park a bit. Be all right. We'll survive, won't we? We'll get there. We'll be back here into it.
So I'm assuming then that all yours are off for 2 weeks. Mine's obviously at school all most of next week, and then obviously has Friday off, a Good Friday, and then has got 2 weeks off. So I'm guessing the last week of our holidays, quite a few other schools will already be back.
Yes.
I think it's just Hertfordshire being a bit strange for some reason.
No, my friend in Wigan's not off till next week either.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're off from today for 2 weeks, and then we have an extra day on the Monday. I think it must be a training day, and then we go back to Tuesday. But yeah, we've only got 2 weeks, so. Oh, yeah.
We've got a half day today. In 2 weeks. Well, we're going to Blackpool, and we're going to stay in a tent, and we haven't used our tent. We've used our tent once, and that was about 6 years ago. So we're hoping the tent's okay, because we're going all the way up to Blackpool with our tent. Yeah. Apparently, we're going to go to SpongeBob World, according to my son, who was very happy after the SpongeBob movie.
Okay, you're going to the Pleasure Beach?
when we weren't intending to. It was supposed to be a cheap time out, a couple of days with our Merlin annual passes, you know, which we paid for. But it's on the telly, isn't it? So,
Yeah.
oh yeah.
It is. I mean, yeah, Pleasure Beach is very expensive, but you will be there. I mean, we were there last time we went. We were there for 11 hours. Wow. It was really good, and that was for everybody from sort of grandparents down to my 4-year-olds. And we all had a really good day. So yeah, it does seem a lot of money. It's about £25 each or something. But you are there all day. But you can get some deals if you look. Or you can always ask them.
Okay, so we're going to sign off until next week. We are hoping to start having a bit more organisation on these hangouts and have themes going. So yeah, watch this space, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.